Although our program goal is a joyful and carefree second half of life, it's inevitable that at some point you and I will suffer loss of a loved one. If they are still alive today, obviously our parents are growing older and older, and as we age, some of us will lose a spouse or life partner. In fact, our next guest lost her beloved husband in 1992 when he was only 32, and there's the almost unimaginable chance that we will lose a child. And as I have mentioned before in this program, my wife Gloria and I lost our daughter Kristen at age 30 when she crashed her plane. And our guest, Rachel Blythe Kodanaz, is here to talk about living with loss one day at a time, and that's really the only way to recover from the loss of a loved one. And by the way, that's the title of her new book. And Rachel is a motivational speaker. She's a grief consultant that specializes in advising employers on assisting their employees coping with a loss, and I think that's a wonderful cause. She's a grief consultant and facilitator, columnist for Living with Loss magazine, and she's published frequent articles on grief and recovery, and she's appeared on numerous radio and TV shows, including Good Morning America, and we're honored to have her with us today. And hello, Rachel, and welcome to Middle Age Can Be Your Best Age.
Thank you for that introduction, and thank you for having me on today. I truly appreciate it.
Well, let's begin. Can you please describe the personal tragedy of losing your 32-year-old husband when you had a 2-year-old daughter and a management job that took a lot of your time, and that must have been a horrible experience. But how were you able to recover from that personal tragedy to move forward positively into what you're doing now, counseling others that are grieving?
So my journey started, and quickly from my background, as you had mentioned, that I was in corporate America. By profession, I'm information technology, Fortune 100 companies, and telecommunications. So obviously that's quite different than from what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
But in 1992, when my husband passed away, it was he just said goodbye to me that morning, and it was arrhythmia. He was an athlete, and it was over when his time was up. And as you can imagine, it put me in a whirlspin of what am I going to do, and what does my life look like?
Yeah.
And the hardest part is those first couple of years, the emotions take over the logic.
Yeah.
So while here I am 20 years later, I can see the light. Back then I couldn't. And really how I survived it was I trained for the Hawaiian Ironman in his honor and accomplished that.
Oh. So
as people tell me, I beat my body. And just to work through some of my emotional piece of the situation, it's only a journey that you can handle, and you losing a child know that firsthand.
Yeah.
That only you can walk the journey.
Yeah, and that's why so often people that try to give advice, like saying you've really got to shape up now, or it's time to move on, and that kind of thing, is really off base, because everyone has to do it pretty much at their own pace, and not to seek advice from others, but
and I think people do that. I think people do provide that, or what you should and shouldn't do. That's my quote: is what you should and shouldn't do. I think people do that because they want to see you happy again, and they want to fix you. And what my message to the survivors and the people around the survivor is that, as you just said, they have to do it on their own journey, but really there's nothing to fix. It's just they've got to put this into their place, and as soon as they can redefine what happened to them, then they will be on a journey of recovery. But until that, and you have to stay in your grief. You want to be with your loved one for as long as you can.
Yeah. You say that there are ways to turn sadness into something uplifting by learning to take care of yourself. Can you share a few ways that grief can actually be good for you, or how you can make that conversion so that there is positive coming out of it?
That's actually a good analogy, a good thought pattern. Is people that are recently bereaved, whether they've lost someone or even they've had a diagnosis and lost some type of their health is going to change.
Yeah.
Is you go into a grief mode right away because of that loss.
Yeah.
But there are gifts of grief and gifts that are associated with loss, and usually it comes out to be your outlook on life has changed, and you value life. And the second one is the relationship that you build with some of the people around you. I know people are quick to say that their loved ones moved, their surviving loved ones had provided some distance, but it's really because they don't know what to do. But just like what I'm doing right now, the fact that I am moving to help other people, providing clarity on a subject that's often overlooked, that's a gift of losing my husband. That's a gift of what I've learned about myself.
Yeah, I think it's so important if, say, you're a surviving spouse and moving forward to help your children and help other people to get over their grief really helps you as well to get over or cope with your own sadness. If you put, like you had a 2-year-old daughter, obviously, that you had to comfort and counsel, and that must have helped in dealing with your own grief, I would assume.
I do believe that, and when I spend a lot of time with I work with Camp Widow, and that's a program that we have 3 times a year, and I meet with a lot of widows that are younger, and I say that, I really do believe that my daughter gave me some strength I had no choice because I was a parent, but the gift that I received from her is that when Mommy said no, there was no daddy to run to, and we are so incredibly tight. I mean, we have the best relationship. I'm married now, and my husband says that they forgot to cut our umbilical cord, and I really do believe that. And I think it's because of this loss that we have a respect for each other that is incredible.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And instead of just continue to lament the fact that you lost the husband or wife, you can look at that possibility that you can build this remarkably close relationship with your children, and by doing that, as you just said, by giving them special attention and growing together through the grief. But well, thankfully, most of us will not suffer from death of a family member or loved one this year, but a lot of us will have the experience of a close friend or an extended family member or a worker on the job who will suffer loss. And what are some of the things we should say and do, and a few things we definitely should not say and do as we attempt to comfort others at their time of loss?
Well, I would say the number one thing that you need to do is listen, but not just listen, you need to hear. You need to hear what they're saying. Don't assume that when you're listening, that you think you hear what they're saying, but you really need to hear what they're saying. And another one is that while you need to provide support and love and care, it's really the griever doesn't want the hovering. Yeah. They want the attention and the love, but when you hover over them, and I used to say, stop staring at me, was that you provide a uncomfortable situation. And a couple other ones is when somebody says no to you, that they, like you ask them to go do something, they say no, keep asking. Don't push, but keep asking. Don't give up on them. And as far as what not to say, is that if I lose my mom and you lose your mom, our reaction is different. So saying that you know exactly how they feel, you don't know exactly how they feel.
I love that. I love that chapter where you talked about things that you should are good to hear and things that aren't good to hear. And I like the ones like somebody that just lost a child. Well, you're young and you can have more children. And that doesn't really help the grieving for the one that's going.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't at all. And so what I just try to really is, what would you want to hear? I wrote an article that's actually launched my whole writing on the subject was Don't Ask, Just Do, years and years ago. Because if you're going to ask me what I need, I'm already going to do it. Yeah. So you need, as a friend of a griever, you need to figure it out.
Yeah. Well, tell us about your book, Living with a Loss One Day at a Time. I think that's a fascinating book because it's down-to-earth, common-sense approach rather than, a bunch of spiritual things that may or may not help. It's kind of a practical guide to dealing with grief. And tell us a little about that and the format you have and what you have in that book.
So I had a book in me. I've been providing, facilitating grief groups and, as I said, Chair a Camp Widow and presenting nationally on the subject of grief and loss, and whether it was a caregiver perspective, it was, funeral, whatever. I've just been all over speaking, and people ask me a lot of questions, and I get a lot of emails and a lot of data. So over the years, I have been just making notes of what I've heard from people, and I had a book in me, but I didn't know what the format would want, what I wanted it to be. And while I wanted to write something that was helpful. I really wanted to pay it forward to the next group of people. And my story is just a story. While it's tragic, Roy, you have a tragic story. Most of your listeners have some tragic story.
Yes.
So I decided that wasn't the format that I was going to do it. And what I really thought would be best is a little encouragement every single day, just a little bit.
Yeah.
And so I wrote it in a daily, just daily aspects of lessons and thoughts of grief. And some days, as you saw it, some days I'm very nice to the reader, and I say, today's the day, just grab a cup of tea, hot cup of tea, and sit on the couch.
Mine
and
is
other
your
days,
comfort food, I know, one day.
Yes, and then other days, I just talk about, one meal a day should be with others. That means you need to figure out how to have a meal with somebody.
Yeah.
Or where have all my friends gone? Or, capture the stories or waves of grief, and don't ignore your grief. Every day is something different, and it's truly designed. It doesn't matter if you have a recent loss or the loss has been 10 years from now. You don't have to start in January because there's no dates. You can start in the middle. You could read 7 days in a row, or you can however you want to use the guide, you can use it. And what I've learned through the emails that I've received regarding the book is that people are using it as a form of a journal, because as you saw on each page, there's a little bit area to write. So they're writing their own notes of that day, and I'm getting wonderful feedback on that.
Yeah, that's a wonderful aspect, to have a place to write your own thoughts in the book and refer back to them. Well, where's the best place somebody can go to preview your book or to purchase your book?
Well, you could purchase it on all online, whether it's Amazon, whether it's Barnes & Noble, whether it's one of your community, like a smaller independent store in your particular community.
Yeah.
It's also available on my website, which is RachelKodanaz.com. It's RachelKodanaz.com. If they're purchased on my website, I offer that I will sign it, and write a note to whoever.
Also, I went to a website for the Living with Loss magazine, www.livingwithloss.com, and they offer your signed book on that through that website as well.
Right.
And I noticed you also wrote a handbook, which I think is great, Grief in the Workplace Management Handbook, and that's if you're an employer or a small business owner and you have an employee that suffers a loss, I think that's a great guideline tool of how I know you talk at length on your website of how some companies give ridiculous 3 days for people to grieve, grief leave or whatever you want to call it, and how difficult it is dealing with that.
Right. I do have a specialty in the workplace because I come from management and because I come from the corporate environment.
Yeah.
I feel that, I have an ability to go in and really share with them what that first year looks like of somebody's grieving, or if they've lost an employee, of what will happen to that work group. And I do have, like I said, the expertise, but I also have the management side of what it takes for managers and human resources to deal with a situation. That is one of my passions in the whole loss, because if you're a caregiver for a family member, it is important you need to be with that family member, but you also have to work your job.
Yeah.
And I try to help the companies with the challenges that come about it, but how you build compromise.
And how best did they contact you, through your website, or is that the best way of?
Through my website, which is, as I said, RachelKodanaz.com, or Rachel@RachelKodanaz.com, but you can get to that through my website.
Yeah, well,
and I am available as I travel all over, as I shared, doing presentations and sharing not just this book, but also, consulting to companies and other groups.
Yeah, well, I think you're performing a wonderful service, and I trust that none of you out there will need to have immediate need for Rachel's book anytime soon, but perhaps you have loved ones who would benefit from it, or at some point in time, we all will face dealing with loss, so it's an excellent book to have around. And that, once again, that's Living with Loss One Day at a Time by Rachel Kodanaz. And you can go to her website, or you can get that through Amazon.com as well. And thank you so much for joining us